Shalom Eastern Shore. I am Rabbi David Tokacher with Congregation Maim Chaim, the Eastern Shore's Messianic Synagogue, and I am bringing you your daily dose of living water. In Exodus 12, we read about the 10th and final plague that the Lord inflicted upon Egypt in order to free Israel by his mighty hand. In particular, this chapter gives us a lot of detail in regards to the preparation and procedure of the Passover itself, the marking of the doorposts with the blood of the lamb, as well as Pharaoh finally breaking down and telling Moses to take the children of Israel out of Egypt, along with their children and all their possessions, and leave Egypt immediately. However, there is one small tidbit of the account found in Exodus 12 that has always stood out to me and made me ponder the wonder of God's love and care for his people. Exodus 12:35 through 36 says, "So Bnei Israel acted according to the word of Moses. They asked the Egyptians for articles of silver and gold and for clothing. Adonai gave the people favor in the eyes of the Egyptians and let them have what they asked for. So they plundered the Egyptians." As we sit back and read the Bible today, we have the advantage of knowing the full story of what will happen to Israel as they enter the wilderness. We know that they will be called by God to build the Mishkan, or the tabernacle, to establish the priestly service, that they'll spend 40 years wandering the wilderness before entering the promised land, and so on. With all of that in mind, these two verses really stand out to me as a powerful message of God's provision for his call. Think about it. Israel had been enslaved in Egypt for years. They had very minimal possessions and definitely had broken spirits. Yet, not only was God providing them freedom, but he was bringing them into freedom of greater calling. Yet, how would these former slaves with very little earthly possessions be able to fulfill all that God had in store for them? The Lord not only had a tremendous call awaiting them, he was already miraculously making provisions for the fulfillment of that call. The Torah says that they plundered Egypt without ever lifting a weapon. They asked, and the Egyptians gave them everything they asked for. They left with Egypt's wealth. The Israelites didn't know at the time, but God had just provided them with everything they would need in order to fulfill the great call he had awaiting them at Sinai. Here's why this message is so powerful to me. When we answer God's call today, the same exact reality is true for us as it was for Israel in the Exodus. The Lord has great purpose for our lives, hence why he has provided redemption from slavery to sin through Messiah Yeshua, and he has already provided everything we could possibly need to walk in his calling. So often we are afraid to move forward when the Lord tells us to pick up and go because we are so afraid of the unknown. What about the financial aspect? What about the time cost? What about the provision for my family? We worry and worry and worry about things that the Lord has already made miraculous provision for. We simply have to follow the leading of the Lord to see these provisions and promises fulfilled. Israel had no clue what was laying ahead of them aside from freedom. Yet right before their eyes, God was giving them everything they'd need to answer the call to build the tabernacle. When we are faithful to answer the call, he is faithful to see it fulfilled. So what is stopping you from taking the first step of trusting in the fulfillment of God's call on your life? Shalom.